Hello, I'm Anastasia Powell and I'm an Associate Professor in Criminology at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. For 14 years, I've been researching sexual violence and harassment against women, and particularly the way that technology is being used to harass and abuse. There is clear research that shows that women journalists receive not only a greater volume of online abuse, but also that the nature of that online abuse is often directed at them as women specifically. So often this abuse has a sexual content, it has threats of assault, and has descriptions of a sexually violent nature. It's certainly much more than just a few nasty comments online. And in some cases, of course, women find themselves being targeted with hundreds, even thousands of abusive comments, direct messages to their personal Twitter and other social media, as well as to their emails. But how can we respond to this online abuse that women journalists in particular receive? Well, there is research with women journalists that details their personal strategies for responding to this kind of online abuse. Common strategies include, for some people, just trying to ignore it, deleting abusive comments, blocking keywords that regularly appear in this sort of abusive comment, and blocking repeat abusers, the people themselves that are doing this. But while these are important strategies, and I think they're good advice for anyone who's experiencing online abuse, I think it's also a mistake for us to only put the responsibility back onto individual women to have to respond to this abuse entirely on their own. After all, this is online abuse that they are receiving because of their job and because of their role in public life as a journalist. So in my view, it is time for workplaces to be working with their staff to better support women journalists and indeed journalists generally when they do find themselves being targeted, particularly with a high volume of online abuse. So what I would like to see is workplaces working with their staff to develop clear policies for when and how the organisation will take action to help respond to the abuse. I'd like to see some support, some resources being put towards assisting journalists who are receiving online abuse to help them to block and delete abusive comments and to block abusive users so that they're not having to deal with that burden of responding to that avalanche of abuse completely on their own. I'd also like to see the workplace support women to document evidence of the abuse where that might be appropriate so that they can take legal action. So, for example, if the abuse is being repeated from some of the same users, or if it involves serious threats of violence, for example, then I'd like to see workplaces really supporting women journalists in taking that further action, rather than just dismissing the abuse or telling them, as I think is so often the case, that they should just learn to ignore it and that it's part of the job. I don't think we should be accepting this sort of online abuse and harassment of women as just part of the job. And finally, I'd like to see employee assistance programs or similar programs of debriefing or counselling support made available, especially in those cases where women are really being targeted with a large or ongoing campaign of online abuse. I think it's really important that we acknowledge these are serious harms. When women experience online abuse, it's often of a very sexually violent nature. It's often sustained over a period of time, often involves a range of repeated commentary and different range of users. And this wears women down, it silences their voices, it impacts on their capacity to do their work, and we should not be accepting it as just part of the job.